Hello and welcome to episode 44 of the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Doug Campbell. Doug, thank you so much for being with me today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you very much for the introduction, Lewis. Very excited to be here.
Amazing. Well, let's get in. Let's not mess around. As always, we'll start with Doug, in your own words, what makes you a man?
Ooh. Whenever I get asked a question like that, I always kind of like to let my subconscious do the thinking for me and sort of see what words intuitively come to mind. And for me, I would say it's based around action. I think boys talk, men act. That would probably be the sort of simple way I would say it. And I think to do what you'll say you're going to do is probably the biggest thing I would say. But aside from that, it's probably also around to provide, to protect. I think more sort of traditional values and things like that.
Awesome. It's a great question to ask, and I like the boys and men side of it, because I think for me, it's sort of I had this conversation with someone the other day, and I sort of said, I'm in my 30s and I only just think I'm a man. And it's like you turn 18 and you're meant to be a man. But yeah, I think there's a true awakening of that as well, which is cool to hear from another side. But Doug, why don't you let everyone know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was working in the corporate world throughout my 20s. I kind of did everything I was sort of told to do by the sort of societal norms, worked hard at school, went to university, got a degree, went and sat down at an office job and did that for about 10 years. But I sort of, as I approached my 30s, I really didn't feel very fulfilled. In fact, quite the opposite. I felt depressed. I felt very anxious. I was overweight. And I was actually suicidal at one point as well. So I was very aware that sort of something needed to change. But this was the end of 2017. So we're going back a few years. And I think it's easy to forget how relatively new and modern the sort of conversation around men's mental health is. And back then it was pretty once in a blue moon that anyone talked about it. And but I felt compelled to do so. And I remember, I told a couple of people how I was feeling, and ended up putting out a post on LinkedIn of all platforms. I don't really know why, but because I don't use it at all anymore, but I did. And the response was insane. I think it was seen maybe 50,000 times. But what was more startling was the response I got to it. And just sort of made you realize that certainly you're not alone in this sort of plight of how you feel. But coming out the back end of how I felt, I was very aware and determined to take action. And I think it comes back to what I just said to you there about sort of boys talk, men act. And I really saw it as a second life. It was like I can't even explain it. It's almost metaphysical. It felt like I'd been reborn almost slightly. And I went down a journey, a path. I started with my physical health. I don't know why. Again, it kind of just came to me. And I worked very hard at that, got in good shape, and realized that actually the physical world affects the mental world. And it sounds so obvious, but I never really correlated the two. I think it made me realize as well that up until, I think like a lot of the young men, I'd felt pretty invincible until probably the age of about 25. Nothing can touch you, you're fine. And then I remember around turning 25, I started to feel anxious. I didn't really know what it was. I didn't really understand it. It was scary. I remember one time thinking I was having a heart attack. I'm not really sure what it was. And then this kind of grew and grew and grew, but you don't talk about it. You bury yourself and you drink too much and you go out and you party and all of this stuff. And then, 5 years down the road, I was like, I need to do something about this. And long story short, now I've, in the last 5 years, coached over 100 men and women to sort of get in better shape, feel better about themselves, improve their confidence, and all sorts of other stuff like that.
I love that. It's it's really interesting. I'd love to go a little bit further back, if that's okay, into sort of that career, because a lot of people listening will sort of maybe be in sort of similar situations to that, where maybe they're feeling a little bit lost and a little bit helpless. So can you sort of go into a little bit more detail around that story and how you felt and what was sort of the big trigger to get you going?
Well, I think I felt out of control and trapped. It's probably the two sort of things that come to mind when I really think about it. It was something inside me told me I wasn't meant to be doing this, but I didn't know what I was meant to be doing. And I know there's a lot of people who really struggle with that. I have friends who know, again, they're in that position, but they're not quite ready to take, whether that's a leap of faith or the answer hasn't come to them yet. And funnily enough, the answer came to me through my own struggle. And I think that's important for a lot of people. The biggest trigger for me, the final trigger, funnily enough, was heartbreak. I had broken up with a girl and was devastated. I've been completely in love with her. And I was like, there's no better motivation.
Okay, nice. Not I'll show her kind of thing, but sort of,
Yeah, there were two sides to it. There were definitely two sides to it. There was a bit of that. But there was also like, God, this is there's something inside of you that tells you when you've hit rock bottom, when you've really hit it.
Yeah, I can attest to that as well. I've been there. I've looked myself in the face through the mirror, and it wasn't a pretty sight by any stretch of the imagination. If you don't mind, I would like to go a little bit darker because you did touch on it, and I think it is really useful. I also have had suicidal thoughts and sort of been down that road as well. I imagine it was sort of post breakup. Is that sort of where it started to kick in, or was that
Pretty much, yeah. It was around that time. I feel quite lucky in the sense that for me, that sort of real rock bottom spell was quite thick, but it was fast. It didn't last a long time, and I pulled myself out of it relatively quickly. Like I say, I can't really explain it. I just felt compelled to do something about it. And I imagine, there's 8 billion brains out there and we all have a different one. But my experience of it was once I got the chance to kind of dissect it and look back on it, was that it's almost like a lot of people don't realize that our brain's job is essentially to keep us alive. Our brain likes to keep us in a state of homeostasis, which is staying the same. But when I felt suicidal, it was like my brain turned on itself. It was suddenly seeing green lights when they were red and vice versa, and suddenly you feel almost compelled to hurt yourself. You feel like you're helping other people by removing yourself from the equation. It's very strange. But like I say, I was quite lucky. I pulled myself out of it quite quickly. But it's rough. But that was my personal experience with it.
Yeah, similar. I think not to sort of devalue anyone going through anything like this. I think genuinely it is thick and fast. I think if it's truly genuine, I think you either commit or you rebound. And it is literally, like you say, it is rock bottom. I remember it being literally an evening, and then the next morning I was in the mirror going, what are you doing? Like, it's time to move forward. Otherwise, this is not the right way to go. It's not a perfect road back up, but I think you're right. It's almost like a bang straight out. And
I think, people like yourself and I wish we had the knowledge to know what the difference is between being able to look yourself in the mirror and make that decision versus the people who unfortunately don't and go the other way.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that would be a powerful pill or sentence if you could find the right words to get anyone out of that situation, most definitely.
I think the hardest thing about the mental health side of things, from the way I look at it, is that the brightest neuroscientists in the world admit that we don't know that much about our brains. And I think everybody is very careful talking about it because we're also very aware that we're also different. And it's very difficult to have a conversation like this. And some people might relate to it and other people might feel almost more lost by listening to it. And whilst our intention is also always positive and to try and help people, I think the other biggest issue, and I'm sure we'll come on to this, is exactly what I started with, is that my opinion and my view of mental health has changed quite drastically since I first kind of came out and talked about my struggles with it. In the sense that I believe the narrative, which a lot of people believe, that it's the best thing you can do is to talk about it. And I think that's obviously an important step, to have that self-actualization and then to externalize it and to talk to other people about it. But we live in a world now of information overload, where everyone knows everything, and it's knowing what to do with it and then doing it. And the best thing that you can do, particularly from a man's perspective, is to act. I think the other problem we've got is that men's mental health and women's mental health has been grouped together, and we're very different, and we deal with things very differently. One of the best piece of relationship advice I ever got was, don't try and solve a woman's problems, just hear them. And it's very true. We're very different.
We are. And you touched on it yourself. You said you did that post like 7 years ago, and that was very new and very almost rare. And you even use the words coming out as if
Yep.
talking about your mental health is like I've got mental health, and you've like come
Yep.
out of a closet with I have depression. It's
Well,
like,
the funniest thing about that, a post like that, is really, if you break it down, what that is, it's self-accountability.
yeah,
It's admitting that there's something not quite right, and it's saying it to the world. Whether that's saying it to one person or the internet,
yeah,
it doesn't really matter. That's the hardest part. But then you have to quickly move from the talking about it phase into the action phase, because a lot of people get stuck in the talking about it phase. And what then happens, from what I've seen, and I know this working with a lot of clients, whether it's with their food or their diet, or their exercise, is they get stuck in the identity. I am a depressed man.
yeah.
And if you're stuck in that identity, your reality will reflect it. Now, it's very difficult to move and to change your identity. I often say that, your reality will lag behind your identity by 6 to 12 months. But you have to start to act like the type of person that you want to become now. And in 6, 12 months, you will be that person.
It is a tough thing, and I think it is becoming more talked about that men and women are different, and the way that we should deal with mental health and depression and essentially personal development is different. It is coming to the forefront, which is great. And I have interviewed a lot of people, and I know a lot of people that are doing great stuff in the talking space. And it's funny that you say it. And I actually said this to another guy that I just interviewed. These conversations seem to come at the right time for me as well, from a podcast point of view. And I've moved from talking to doing. Like I'm always open to listen and talk, but I'm also now in a doing stage, and I want to do more, and I want to grow, and I want to be better as a man, and I want other people to follow suit. So it's interesting that you say that you've gone through that shift as well. And yeah, I'm sort of going through that shift now, which is nice.
I think it's fantastic that we can have conversations like this, and that there are people, not just you and I, but hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other men out there who are willing and able to be open about their own experiences. But the best thing that we can do with a conversation like this is leave people with actionable advice to take, because otherwise it's just more information.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I guess it's a nice segue to sort of move on to a little bit more about what it is that you do now, and how you've sort of helped. You obviously work with men and women, but maybe if we focus a little bit more on the male side,
Yep.
what does a typical sort of client look like for you?
Most of the guys that I tend to work with have some kind of milestone coming up, or have just passed, whether that's they've just become a father, they are on the cusp of turning 40, they have just turned 40, they have gone through a divorce or something like that. And they are in that action stage, because a lot of people maybe get confused between what a coach like myself does. My job is not to motivate you, it's to point you in the right direction and to help then with your trajectory and with your speed of travel, because you're going to pay either way, whether you pay with time or whether you pay with money. And most people, when it comes to their physical health and probably their mental health as well, again, it comes back to, it's not that they need more information, it's they need accountability, and they need the carrot, and they need the stick. And a good coach, I think, provides both of those and can point you in the right direction. And I always say to people, it's far more important to be in the right direction and on the right trajectory than it is the speed that you're moving at. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, nowadays, we're focused on speed because we're focused on instant gratification. I want the solution now, because we're fixated with our phones and social media, and we can get everything in immediately, whether it's ordering food on Deliveroo or whatever it might be. It's all instantly available. The world is very easy, but our bodies have to, it takes time.
Yeah. So how do you sort of combat that? Because social media, the things that do well are abs in 8 weeks, photos of abs, photos of bums for girls. These are the sort of things that drive following and drive people to go, oh, I want a bit of that. That's what I want my life to look like. And the quick sell is always going to be there. We always want the quick fix. So how do you sort of gear your clients to a stage 1, a stage 2, and sort of et cetera from there?
Yeah. So for me, it all starts with education. It's connecting the what, the why, and the how. It's figuring out what you actually want to do, which most people come to me with. They know what they want. And then the first thing I say to them is, why do you actually want this? What is the deep-rooted, intrinsic motivator and driver for you. It shouldn't be an external validation. It should be something that drives you, because when you're 5-6 weeks in and it's a cold, dark, wet and windy Tuesday morning, you are not going to be able to rely on motivation and willpower. So I need you to understand in your own mind why you are doing this. And then once they figured that out, so the mindset is probably the first step. And again, it's shifting their identity. It's okay, cool. So you've told me that this is what you want to achieve and this is why you want to do it. So this is the type of person that you want to become, essentially. Cool. These are the habits, the actions, the behaviors, the values that you need to adopt today to become that person in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever it might be. The more you commit to that, the faster you will get there. And the more dedicated you are and the stronger the why that you've got, the quicker you will get there. And then the education comes in with the how. So how are you going to do that? And this is where I really focus on principles rather than methods, because when it comes to diet, you've got hundreds of diets. When it comes to exercise, you've got hundreds of different types of exercise. But it's really helping people to understand like the principles of this stuff, how it works and why there's value in doing what you're doing. So if I give you some examples, if I was to say to someone like, how do you lose weight? Most people will say, oh, well, eat a little bit less and move a little bit more. Cool. Yeah. Right? Or they'll say, oh, it's calories in, calories out. They'll give you something like that. And of course, we know that, at the top level, the basics, that is it. But there's a lot more to it because you're dealing with humans, not robots. And we've got emotions and we've got triggers and stuff like this. So it's helping people to correlate why they're doing it and why it's going to be of value. A lot of people come to me and say, I know I should be eating more protein. I know I should be drinking more water, but they don't understand why. So it's helping them to understand the value in the habits and the actions that they're taking so that their brain can correlate the cause and the effect.
Do you think that a lot of your clients are coming to you for initially the wrong reasons, and then they're talking to you and going, oh, okay, actually, I get it now, because you've been through something else? Whereas maybe a traditional PT who's always been in great shape just goes, yeah, this is how you get big muscles.
I think a lot of people come to a coach thinking that they have secret information that no one else knows. And it's funny, I actually wrote an email about this the other day. I said, you know everything you need to know. And if there's something you don't think you know, reply to this email and I'll tell you it for free. Because the value in coaching is not in the information, it's in the implementation. That's the difference.
Yeah, it's, everyone wants the secret sauce, right? This is this sort of like this balance between what's put out on social media and the truth. To put it bluntly. Yeah, it's
100%. Well, I think the thing as well, it comes back to reframing it. So whether it's your reframing your mental health. So a lot of people, again, we're wired, particularly men, we're wired to solve problems.
Yeah.
Okay. I am anxious. I am depressed. Okay. How do I solve that? Well, unfortunately, particularly with depression right now, we don't have a cure. So we can't necessarily solve the problem fully, 100%.
Yeah.
But we can manage it. How do we manage it? Okay, cool. We live a more healthy lifestyle. We're conscious of it. We're aware. We make better decisions. But because we can't solve the problem, because we can't click our fingers and solve it now, a lot of people get lost. And as we said earlier, a lot of people get stuck because they don't know what to believe, who to believe, or where to start, because they have so much information coming from all angles.
So if we take you and talking and all of the things that you've done, what have you seen within your peer group? Because you probably will have had peers that were very similar to you based on the career that you'd taken, and then you took a shift away from that. So what did it look like for you once you sort of gone, you know what, I'm making a change?
Physically, it was, like I say, just about really dialing in on simple habits that I could sustain. So simple things done well, and shifting the mindset from trying to find solutions to trying to build something that is sustainable and healthy. Because you could go into it and think, oh, I'm going to be on a diet for the rest of my life. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, but then you want to build something that's going to last. It's something that's going to be easy and almost subconscious.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really about understanding how do you get there. It's not trying to, I suppose it's what it really comes down to is changing your expectations of yourself and trying not to think that you're going to be able to necessarily solve every single problem. Being very open-minded as well, that nothing is finite and nothing is set in stone. I used to be very set in my ways and, this is right, this is wrong, black and white. Whereas now I think coming into anything, I'm a lot more open-minded. And I think that definitely helps as well.
When you sort of went on this path, what was the response with sort of like friends and family? Because for me, I lost people, but I also created new relationships. It's just interesting to see what the dynamic was there with you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you change and grow, so does your peer group and your friend group. You realize that, I think it was on another podcast that I was listening to. They were saying that you realize in your 20s, you don't necessarily have friends, you have drinking partners. And that's very true. I think your friendship group naturally gets trimmed as you go into your 30s and your 40s. And, as people take different paths, whether that's the marriage route, the kids route, whatever it might be, or change of careers, your peer group will naturally shift. And I suppose it all comes down to people's values, doesn't it? And it doesn't make anybody right or wrong. But unfortunately, a lot of people, and I have to, I sort of warn my clients about this, one of the biggest unexpected issues that you'll have is resentment. Because a lot of people, whether we like it or not, they will compare themselves to one another. So even if you're not going backwards, but someone next to you is moving forward and they're moving forward fast, it feels like you're going backwards. So they start to then resent that person, because a lot of people sit in a very low level of consciousness. They're sort of in that victim mode. The world is happening to them. They don't think, and again, this comes back to control. They don't think, or they don't maybe have any control over their own reality. So once you gain that control of your reality, you realize that you can rise up the levels of consciousness and start to take action and start to improve yourself and change as well. But yeah, 100% along the way, you see people's true colors. People go through their own things. You lose people, but you also gain new relationships, which are probably better for you, deeper rooted and more aligned with your actual values. Because a lot of the time, I think in your 20s, certainly from my experience, everybody is kind of just trying to fit in.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily fully aware of your own identity at that stage. You're not really sure what you stand for as a man. And I'm sure if we were to have this conversation, I'm 36, I'm not sure how old you are, in 10 years' time, it would shift again and again and again. And so that's, so on and so forth.
Yeah, definitely will. That's something that I really want to encourage, is to have this conversation regularly and often, because it will change. And I said it right at the beginning, right? I didn't feel a man until I was in my 30s. So it was like it's a playground in your 20s, and it's good and it's exciting, and you can try new things, and you get dealt a lot of shit as well. Like you naturally, if you're putting yourself out in the world, you're going to get hit hard in some cases as well. What the problem is you and I, and so by the sounds of it, a lot of your clients sort of go through a life shifting or something that jolts them and makes them want to make a change. And we talk about those people there that are almost treading water and aren't necessarily declining, but aren't also going anywhere. If there's someone like that listening that wants to make a change, but hasn't just been essentially shaken, is there anything that you can think to sort of start them to move them in the right direction?
I would say there's a lot of people at that place probably because they haven't necessarily felt enough pain. And that sounds brutal,
Yeah.
But I think it's also very true. Pain creates change. But what I would also suggest, and it's a bold strategy, but having done it myself, is to remove choice from the equation. When you truly burn the boats, you will be amazed what you can achieve. It pushes you past points where you thought you would stop. I think it's the SAS or the Navy SEALs talk about the 40% rule and how even when we think we're going to give up, that's only 40% of our true capacity as men, as women, as human beings. Again, it comes back to that point we said earlier around homeostasis, the fact that your brain's job is to protect you. It's to keep you alive. It's to keep you the same. And even if you are unhappy, obese, whatever it might be, stuck, your brain only sees, well, I'm still alive. My job is to keep you alive. So we're going to keep you here. And you have to fight that. And the more entrenched you are in that comfort zone, the harder it becomes to pull yourself out of it. But listen, the first steps are the biggest and the hardest. And the more steps you take and the quicker you take them, the smaller and the easier they get. And I always say to people that if you could bottle and sell momentum, you would be a trillionaire, because it's, you've drunk that Kool-Aid. I've drunk that Kool-Aid.
No.
And it is addictive and it's amazing and it's powerful and it makes you feel superhuman. But the only way you can create that is through your own actions. No one else's. You have to do it yourself.
And it's scary, right?
It's terrifying.
Yeah. It's
terrifying. And it's easy for us to sit here having walked the path.
Yeah.
But we forget, unfortunately. Sometimes I wish I could press a button and be transported back to how I felt in those days, how someone might be feeling now listening to us. Because it's very easy for us to sit here and say this. But again, like I say, it comes back to being able to give people actionable advice and reassurance as well.
Yeah, which for me is, like you say, looking back and looking at that timeline, there's always a time we spoke about talking and how that there's a place for that, and moving forward, there's a time for doing. And we're not here to say you need to do because we're doing. You've got to find your own path. It's going to be tough. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be different. But you've got to find what works for you, where it works for you, and at what pace works for you as well. Because my pace and your pace might be slow for some people, or it might be like, Jesus Christ, what have they done in 3, 4, 5 years is insane. But it's all different. It's all a journey. So yeah, it's
another example I like to give, because a lot of my clients, they'll say, they want to join the program, they'll sign up, I'll build them their workouts, whatever it might be. And then that first week I'll sort of say, how'd you get on with your workouts? Oh, well, this. And they haven't been to the gym.
Yeah.
Now, for most of them, what it is a lack of confidence in being able to step into that, right? And you just have to reframe it and remind them that every single person, no matter who they are, what they look like, how long they've been going, has their first day in the gym. And it's the same with the mental gym. Every single person took that first step, had that first day.
Yeah. I mean, again, just saying it's hard to go back there. And I'm trying to almost picture that first day now and trying to sort of draw something that's useful for people to sort of listen to. But it's hard to go back there and find those things. But you're right. That's probably because it was hard to make that first step as well. So yeah, it's all about just stepping into it and doing it. So I guess my next question, Doug, is if we were to rewind to 2017, what is it that you would like to have seen when you started to do your journey? Or is there something now that you wish was there then? What are you seeing in the space now that you're sort of drawn to?
I think the best thing that people can do is be the example and the invitation. So to show their own transformation, whether that's a mental, physical, whatever that might be, and then to give people the path, give people the step-by-step guide of how they did it. And that's not to say that is the only path. As you said, you've got to forge your own. But like we said earlier, the job of a coach is to point you in the right direction, to give you a roadmap, essentially. And I think that is the best thing that people can do. And then the accountability and the encouragement to start. One of the things that I certainly think, and I'm very strongly believe, is that most men are warriors without a fight to have. And I think it's that search for purpose. Why are we here? That's the real hard thing. And that's incredibly personal to every single person.
Yes, it is. And it's so important to find, or at least question. Like what makes you a man is a question I ask, because I don't think it's asked enough. I don't think people ask it. But then you have to, the important part of that question is is like, what do you want to do? What is it that you feel drawn to? As you said, you were drawn, you felt, this is where I'm going. I don't know why I'm going there, but I'm going. And it was just a letting go and allowing that to happen. And it's weird. The podcast I've just had, we were talking about feminism and how with the rise of that, it's actually better to be a man, because now you have more options, because we've almost removed the traditional side of things. And if you really want to go down a different route, you can, because we're having conversations for women on that side. So now we can have conversations for men on that side, which was quite an interesting sort of thought process that we were going down. But for a lot of men, it's still the same. They still want to be that provider. They still want to be a driver and that sort of thing. And that's okay as well. And it's just, but before you even have that conversation, you need to have it with yourself before you can even move forward. Otherwise, you're just doing someone else's job or someone else's journey. as we've sort of both attested to, you go into a career because you think that's the right thing to do, and it's a strange one, but it is what happens.
Yeah, and I think you said it perfectly there. If you don't necessarily know what your purpose is, because I have good friends who are in this position now who are, early 30s, they know they're not necessarily where they want to be, and they know that they are capable of a lot more, and they feel a little bit like a spare part, but they don't necessarily have that shining beacon that I was lucky enough to have. And I say to them exactly what you said. Well, at least question it. And if you don't know, try lots of things. It's not just going to be dumped in your lap.
No.
You have to go out there and try things.
Yeah, I like that. Have you ever thought about like purpose outside of, I guess, I mean, you probably have, I guess, to an extent, is outside of career? That's like the go-to one, right? It's like, I need to quit my job. But I don't think that's necessarily true. You can find purpose in other things. And you talk about health, right? And I think if you have a good health and you look after yourself, that can be a purpose. You can be just the best version of yourself outside of work, and work is a means. Because what I'm really scared, well, not scared of, but what I'm really scared of is having a podcast and everyone going, yeah, he said quit my job and now I'm wandering the streets aimlessly trying to find my purpose. But there are other purposes in life.
1,000%. And, again, this comes back to our point earlier around you have to be open-minded with this, and your purpose, your priorities will shift and they will change and they will mold, and that's fine. A mentor I had said, the best thing that you can do is treat life a little bit like a river, and you don't want to fight the current. You want to go with the flow of it. And sometimes you're going to hit the sides, but the better that you can go with that flow of the river, the more you're going to take out of life. And I sat with that for a long time, because I used to be a I still am to an extent, but I think we all are, really. Yeah. But I'm getting better of letting go of things. And again, I said it to a client today. We were catching up, and I said, listen, all you can do is control the inputs. And if you control the inputs, the outputs will take care of themselves. But no one else can do the inputs for you.
Yeah, which goes all the way back to what you were saying about, I haven't got a secret sauce. I'm just here to help and guide and hold you accountable, carrot, stick.
One of the biggest things that I see my job as, and this is a particular problem from what I've seen in Britain more so than America, is that in Britain, most friendship groups will validate whatever someone says. So someone will say, oh, I'm a bit tired, so I'm going to listen to my body and I'm going to take a week off the gym, and the week turns into the month. My job is to be the 1% who says, well, you've been listening to your body for 5 years and it's not exactly got you to where you want to be. So do you reckon you should listen to your body, or do you reckon you should listen to me? It's brutal.
Yeah.
But people respect it because it's what they actually want. Because the other thing is a lot of everyone is dealing with their own things. And it's almost like we all want to hold the talking stick all the time and talk about our problems. And we're very bad at listening. And we hear people, but we're not necessarily listening. And then it's okay, cool. Is it my turn to talk about my problems now? And we're all in like group therapy, but no one's actually offering any real solutions.
Yeah, pass the potato kind of vibes. Men are inherently really bad at listening, right? We're just solution driven. Like, yeah. You tell me a problem, I'm like, I've got an idea there. And it's like, no. Sometimes just let me tell you, and then I'm going to go do my own thing. And then sometimes you want a solution as well. But as men, we're just like desperate to just give you something. But yeah, sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't.
Well, I think, listen, like men and women are both very capable of getting to solutions, but we do it in different ways. Whereas men, it's like problem solution. Find the quickest and most direct path. Whereas women, it's different.
Yeah, well, we won't go into that. It's a men's podcast. It'll get clipped and I'll be in trouble somewhere. So I'm going to...
That's fine.
Swiftly move on. So obviously this conversation that we're having today is pretty rare. 2017 it would have been really hard to find something like this. What is your sort of hope for the future for men and the men's space and the discussion around well-being in general?
Listen, unfortunately, and I don't necessarily think we know why yet, but since the conversations have become more mainstream, the problem has gotten worse. If we look at the ultimate metric of mental health, which is suicide, it's going in the wrong direction. So my hope is that we start to move through the talking phase and into the action phase. So I would love to see, and I know this happens, and I'm certainly not criticizing anybody who does it. But from what I look, if I take a bird's eye view from this, and I would say and I include myself in this, we're messing this up right now. We're not doing a good enough job. And I think we need to move out of this information stage and into the implementation phase, giving people step-by-step guides, a little bit like how they have step-by-step guides for alcoholics or drug addicts. And that would have I don't know the history of that, but I would imagine that took some time to put together. And I think with men's mental health, because this is still a very nuanced topic, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of years of human existence. And we're talking about this in less than 10 years. This conversation is in its infancy. So maybe this is going to be another 10 years. Maybe in 10 years' time, you and I are sitting here and nothing really has changed. But it's moving from the information into the implementation, because we can talk. It's going to continue to get worse because people are going to get more entrenched into the identity that they cannot change.
Yeah, I think for me, talking is good and it is useful, and it's great that this space has got a voice, and that, as we've touched on, it's becoming apparent that men and women are different. Who knew? And that we react differently to different types of therapy and change and all of these things. And for me, it's a conversation about allowing people to have this conversation as well. I think it's almost too late some people start far too late and they're just gone, and it's just, there's no change there. It's impossible. They don't know. They're just lost. And that for me is important. So education is definitely there. And I had spoke about this last night at a talk, and it's about just letting men be men. Like, it's okay to be a man. It's not dangerous. Right. Mm-hmm. It's actually quite useful. I hope, similar to you, that we allow men to heal in their own way, in the way that works best for them. And I think who knows how long it's going to take. You're right. It could be 10, 20, 30 years. Who knows? But more conversations like this will definitely help.
100%. And to be clear, talking about it is the first step. That isn't something that should be glossed over. Yeah. That isn't something that should go away. And I want to be really clear about that. But it's shifting people from that talking into the doing. I think that's the most important thing. And a little bit like how I have clients, and I'm sure you know people who have this, maybe you've already had this thought yourself, is that treat every day as its own. Because I say that because I have clients who will say, oh, I messed up and it's Wednesday. I'll start again on Monday. And it's the same philosophy with your mindset. But you have to treat every single day as its own. Don't treat it as Monday, Tuesday. One of the best things that I did during the pandemic was I stopped thinking about the days as Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I just was like, yep, it's day 27. Because we attach so much emotion to a day of the week. Yeah. Just because someone somewhere named it. So yeah.
Do you get this? You must always be happy. You must be great now that you've worked on yourself. Like, I think that's the same sort of ethos in the case of, like, guess what? I still have bad days.
Yeah. Like I said, this isn't about finding a solution, a cure. It's about learning how to manage it as best as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Actually, two of the other things that I would love to see in the space in the next, and I think will come relatively quickly. One, I think we're already seeing a shift of, and it's the good side of social media. It's the inspirational, motivational side of social media that's getting people up, getting people out, and encouraging people to tackle this through natural intervention, through whether that's exercise, diet, sleep, talking, whatever it might be, rather than going down the road, which unfortunately, you look at the States, is way further down of SSRIs. I've got personal experience with them. We can have that conversation if you want. Terrible. My experience was, oh, you think you're depressed? Take this tiny little pill and we'll show you what depression really is. I was on the lowest dose of sertraline for 4 months. And I just said, okay, if I'm going to go on this, I'm going to do it properly. So it was clean eating, training hard, no drinking, nothing. And I've never felt worse in my life. Now, that's not to say that SSRIs don't have their place. It's not to say that they can't help people, because I know people personally who they have helped. But again, it's a little bit like people jumping on a quick fix diet.
Yeah.
It's being positioned now as the solution. It was positioned to me as the solution, and it is not. When I went on SSRIs, I didn't even have to see a doctor. I got a text message saying, go to your pharmacy to pick them up. No instruction, no guidance, nothing. That is worrying. If that trend is accelerating, because it's like this problem's out of control, so we'll just give people some pills and hope for the best, we're screwed. And I think that's a huge thing I would like to see. And then the other side of it, which I'm not the expert on, I'm trying to do more research on all the time, is the effect of drugs like psilocybin, and how that might be able to genuinely cure some of this. They're treating it with soldiers who've been in war, who've seen, well, certainly much worse things than I've ever seen or will ever see, and experienced horrors, that make me look like I've lived a very privileged life. And if they're seeing positive results with them, I'm pretty hopeful for how it could affect the everyday man.
Yeah, definitely. I've done 2 really good podcasts. One with Dr. Ed Rainbow, who was a GP, still is a GP, and is very antidepressants. He refuses to prescribe them unless it's an absolute severe case and that he feels that it's an absolute necessity. And the other one was with Ryan Park, and he is huge on testosterone and the links towards high testosterone and lower depression, less chance of heart attacks, less chance of anything that will kill you, basically. And he's actually employed regularly by the NHS to essentially explain that having high levels of testosterone is healthy for a man, which is insane to think that the NHS has to hire an outside party to tell them that being a man is useful for not dying as a man. But
I did a whole series of videos on my YouTube channel around how to sort of naturally boost your testosterone levels. Some of my clients come to me and say, I've had a testosterone test. I've been offered TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. They're in their early 40s. And I say to them, well, look, let's give it 3 to 6 months. Let's see what we can do. And I had one guy recently who we nearly doubled his testosterone in 3 months, in his 40s. Because again, you're told, oh, you're 35. Nah, it's all downhill from here.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're told that and you don't know any better, oh, okay, well, what do? I'll take this pill. Do this. It's insane. It's insanity. Yeah. And there's stuff that is accessible. It's not expensive. It's basic stuff. It's simple things done well, consistently, for longer than you want to. That's a crucial part of it. None of this, no big change will happen in the time frame that you want it to happen. It will take longer and it will be harder than you can imagine. So if you go into it knowing that, as soon as it starts to suck, that's when the change is starting to happen. That's when you double down. That's when you smile and you go, sweet, this is starting to work.
I like that a lot. It was nicely put. Doug, if people have enjoyed listening to you and want to find out more, where's the best place for them to find you?
I appreciate that, Lewis. Best place to go is to my YouTube channel. Just type in Doug Campbell on YouTube and I should come up.
Amazing. And I will leave the final thoughts with yourself. I'll let you summarize and finalize this podcast.
I appreciate that. No, listen, it's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we've been able to positively impact and affect at least one man's life. That's always the goal. And I would say if you are sitting there, if you are struggling, get up and do something. Do anything. It doesn't matter what it is.